In many Catholic churches, 14 images trace the final journey of Jesus from condemnation to burial. These are called the Stations of the Cross. Some moments come from the Gospels, while others developed through later Christian tradition. Together, they invite reflection on suffering, compassion, and perseverance. Station 1. Jesus is condemned to death. Jesus is brought before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate after being arrested by temple authorities. The Gospel accounts describe Pilate questioning Jesus and finding no clear crime deserving death. Yet, the gathered crowd demands crucifixion. Under pressure to maintain public order during the Passover season, Pilate finally authorizes the execution. This moment appears directly in the biblical narratives, especially in the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and Gospel of John. In Catholic reflection, this station highlights themes of injustice and moral responsibility. Jesus stands silent while political power and public pressure combine to produce the verdict. Many traditions see in this moment a reminder that truth is sometimes rejected when fear, authority, and crowd opinion outweigh careful judgment. Station 2. Jesus takes up his cross. After the sentence is given, Roman soldiers place the cross on Jesus and lead him out of the city toward the execution site. The Gospels describe Jesus carrying his cross as the procession leaves Jerusalem for the place known as Golgotha. This moment appears directly in the biblical accounts, especially in the Gospel of John, which states that Jesus went out bearing his own cross. Historically, Roman executions often required the condemned person to carry the crossbeam to the site of crucifixion. In Catholic reflection, this station represents the beginning of the long walk toward death. Many traditions see it as a symbol of accepting suffering with dignity. The moment also echoes Jesus' earlier teaching that those who follow him must be willing to take up their cross, meaning to accept hardship in the pursuit of faithfulness. Station 3. Jesus falls the first time. As Jesus begins the difficult walk toward execution, the weight of the cross and the effects of earlier beating begin to overwhelm him. In the traditional Stations of the Cross, Jesus collapses under the burden and falls to the ground for the first time. This moment does not appear directly in the biblical Gospels. Instead, it comes from later Christian devotional tradition that developed during the medieval period as believers meditated on the suffering of Jesus along the road to crucifixion. Many historians note that Roman scourging could leave a prisoner extremely weak, making such a fall historically plausible. In Catholic reflection, this station emphasizes human frailty. Even someone committed to a difficult mission can stumble under the weight of suffering. The moment invites believers to consider perseverance and compassion toward those who struggle under heavy burdens. Station 4. Jesus meets his mother. As the procession continues through the streets of Jerusalem, tradition holds that Jesus encounters his mother, Mary, mother of Jesus. The Gospels describe Mary's presence during parts of Jesus' life, and especially at the crucifixion, but they do not record this specific meeting along the road. For this reason, the station comes primarily from later Christian devotional tradition rather than a direct biblical passage. Over centuries, artists and theologians reflected on what such a meeting might have meant. In Catholic meditation, the moment represents the quiet suffering of a parent watching a child endure injustice and pain. Mary does not intervene, yet her presence expresses solidarity and grief. Many traditions interpret this station as a reminder that suffering rarely belongs to one person alone. It is often shared by families and communities who stand nearby. Station 5. Simon of Cyrene helps carry the cross. As the procession continues toward the execution site, Jesus becomes too weak to carry the cross alone. The Roman soldiers then compel a passerby named Simon of Cyrene to assist him. This moment appears directly in the biblical accounts, including the Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Matthew, and Gospel of Luke. Simon is described as coming from Cyrene, a city in North Africa, suggesting he may have been a visiting pilgrim in Jerusalem during the Passover season. Roman practice often required forced labor from bystanders when soldiers needed assistance. In Catholic reflection, this station highlights unexpected participation in another person's suffering. Simon did not choose the moment, yet he became part of the story. Many traditions see here a reminder that compassion sometimes begins not with intention, but with being drawn into the burdens of others. Station 6. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. As Jesus continues along the road, Christian tradition remembers a woman who steps forward from the crowd to wipe the blood and sweat from his face with a cloth. She is commonly known as Saint Veronica. This event does not appear directly in the biblical Gospels. Instead, it developed in later Christian tradition during the early centuries of devotional reflection on Jesus' suffering. According to the story, the cloth later bore an image of Jesus' face, sometimes called the Veil of Veronica. While historians treat the account as part of devotional tradition rather than recorded history, the station carries symbolic meaning. In Catholic meditation, Veronica represents quiet compassion shown in a moment of danger and public shame. The act is small but courageous, reminding believers that kindness toward the suffering can appear in simple human gestures. Station 7. Jesus falls the second time. As the journey continues toward the execution site, the weight of the cross and the exhaustion from earlier beating begin to overwhelm Jesus again. In the traditional Stations of the Cross, Jesus collapses a second time along the road. Like the earlier fall, this moment does not appear directly in the biblical Gospels. Instead, it comes from later devotional tradition that developed as Christians reflected on the physical suffering involved in Roman crucifixion. Historical studies of Roman punishment note that prisoners were often severely weakened by scourging before the execution march began. In Catholic reflection, the second fall represents the repeated nature of human struggle. Even after rising once, a person may stumble again. The station invites believers to consider patience, humility, and perseverance when weakness returns after an earlier attempt to continue the journey. Station 8. Jesus speaks to the women of Jerusalem. As Jesus continues along the road, a group of women in the crowd begin to mourn loudly for him. The Gospel of Luke records that Jesus turns and speaks directly to them. Rather than accepting their sympathy, he tells them not to weep for him, but for themselves and their children. His words warn of difficult times that would eventually come upon Jerusalem. Unlike several earlier stations, this moment does appear directly in the biblical narrative. Many historians note that public mourning was common in the ancient world during moments of tragedy. In Catholic reflection, this station highlights Jesus' continued concern for others, even in the middle of his own suffering. The moment suggests that compassion can remain outward-focused, even during personal hardship. Station 9. Jesus falls the third time. As the procession nears the place of execution, the tradition of the Stations of the Cross remembers Jesus collapsing once more under the weight of the cross. This third fall, like the earlier two, does not appear directly in the biblical Gospels. Instead, it developed within later Christian devotional practice as believers reflected on the physical exhaustion that likely accompanied the journey. Roman scourging could leave a prisoner severely weakened, making repeated collapse historically understandable. The location of the crucifixion site, known as Golgotha, was reached only after this final stretch of the road. In Catholic reflection, the third fall emphasizes the limits of human strength. Even near the end of a difficult journey, the body may fail again. Yet the story also highlights persistence as the journey continues despite repeated collapse. Station 10. Jesus is stripped of his garments. When the procession reaches the execution site, Roman soldiers remove Jesus' clothing before the crucifixion. This moment appears directly in the biblical Gospels, including the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and Gospel of John. The accounts also mention that the soldiers cast lots, or gamble, to divide his garments among themselves. In the Roman world, crucifixion often included public humiliation as well as physical suffering, and victims were frequently stripped before execution. For Catholic reflection, this station represents the complete vulnerability of Jesus at this stage of the story. Everything has been taken away: status, protection, and dignity. Many traditions see the moment as symbolizing the stripping away of earthly power and pride, revealing the stark reality of human suffering in its most exposed form. Station 11. Jesus is nailed to the cross. At the execution site, Roman soldiers fastened Jesus to the cross using iron nails driven through his hands and feet. This moment appears directly in the biblical narratives, particularly in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of John, which describe the crucifixion itself. Crucifixion was a method of execution used by the Roman Empire for rebels and criminals, designed both to punish and to publicly display Roman authority. Victims were fixed to wooden beams and left suspended until death. In Catholic reflection, this station represents the physical climax of the suffering that began with the arrest of Jesus. The nails symbolize the final act that binds him to the cross. Many traditions understand this moment as revealing the depth of sacrifice and endurance, as Jesus accepts the suffering without resistance. Station 12. Jesus dies on the cross. As Jesus hangs on the cross, the Gospels describe the final moments of his life. After hours of suffering, he cries out and then dies. This moment appears directly in the biblical narratives, including the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and Gospel of John. Several accounts mention unusual signs surrounding the moment, such as darkness covering the land and the curtain of the Jerusalem temple tearing in two. Historically, crucifixion often caused death through exhaustion and suffocation over many hours. In Catholic reflection, this station marks the central event of the crucifixion story. Many traditions understand Jesus' death as an act of sacrificial love offered on behalf of humanity. The moment is remembered not only as a tragedy, but also as a turning point within the Christian understanding of redemption. Station 13, Jesus is taken down from the cross. After Jesus dies, his body is removed from the cross by followers who had remained nearby. The Gospels describe a respected member of the Jewish council named Joseph of Arimathea, requesting permission from Pontius Pilate to take the body for burial. This moment appears directly in the biblical narratives, including the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and Gospel of John. Later Christian art often depicts Jesus' mother, Mary, holding the body of her son, a scene sometimes called the Pietà. While the Gospels do not describe every detail of that moment, the tradition reflects the deep grief surrounding the crucifixion. In Catholic reflection, this station emphasizes compassion and mourning. The suffering has ended, but the sorrow of those who love Jesus remains. Station 14. Jesus is placed in the tomb. After the body of Jesus is taken down from the cross, it is prepared for burial according to Jewish custom. The Gospels describe Joseph of Arimathea placing the body in a new rock-cut tomb that had not yet been used. The Gospel of John also mentions Nicodemus, who brings burial spices and assists in preparing the body. This moment appears directly in the biblical narratives, including the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and John. A large stone is rolled across the entrance of the tomb, sealing it. In Catholic reflection, this final station represents the quiet stillness after the events of the crucifixion. The journey of suffering has ended, and the story pauses in silence before the events that Christians believe follow on the third day. The Stations of the Cross end in silence at the tomb. The journey has traced the final path of Jesus from condemnation to burial, combining events recorded in the Gospels with moments preserved through centuries of Christian reflection. For many Catholics, walking through these stations is not only about remembering history, but about quietly considering suffering, compassion, injustice, and perseverance. The story pauses here, at the sealed tomb, where grief and hope stand side by side.